Hey guys, thank you guys for being with us today. I'm Paul Devine, and we have a very cool special addition to our retreat this week. We felt as we were recording these videos that it would be really important for us to actually follow our own advice. And so I called up a friend of mine. His name is Paul Albert. He is a Haitian American, and he works for Life Teen Missions as the mission director. And I just asked him simply, would he be willing and comfortable to have a conversation with me? And luckily enough, he said yes. So we put together some clips from that interview, and we hope you enjoy it. And if you are interested in watching the full 40 minutes, we are going to put that as well in the link to the description of this video. So thank you guys for being with us, and I hope you enjoy. I embarrassingly have to admit that my diversity in my friends group has decreased dramatically in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years. And when it came to thinking of somebody that I was friends with who, or somebody who I even knew who was a different color than me, I could come up with 3 people that I felt comfortable reaching out to and saying, would you want to do this with me? And that's pretty crazy, I think. And I kind of want to throw this question out to you, Paul. Like, how do you feel about that as a Black person, hearing that from a white person? How does that actually make you feel?
I think right off the cuff, it's not the norm for me, right? Because I think growing up, I've always had white friends, and white kids in my school, white neighbors, and all that. But I think hearing it, it doesn't surprise me. And I also don't know if that's okay that it doesn't surprise me, right? Because I think it's a good thing for us to have all different types of friends. But I also think it's important that we're not awkward and like, hey, I'm just going to be friends with this person because they're Black or Hispanic or Asian or whatever it is. So it is good to ensure that we're inserting ourselves, or even you and I as fathers, inserting our kids in situations where they will meet different people with different backgrounds, with different colors and shades and all that. It's definitely something we should work on, but at the same time, something that we shouldn't be awkward about as well.
Yeah. And I probably should follow up with my challenge of the last session of saying what I was intending was not for you just to go up to a Black person and just start talking about that race. Because I think that one of the key things that you have to have between when you're starting to talk about this stuff is a level of trust. And if you haven't built that level of trust up, I don't know. I'm assuming it won't come across very well. Have you experienced any racism from white people?
Yeah, man, I have. And really, I think even as I talk to Black friends and Hispanic friends, I'm beginning to realize that I don't have one friend who's a person of color who hasn't. And I've experienced it from a very young age. But really, some of the ones that have like shocked me the most, I remember being in a car up in Boston, going to the mall with my brother-in-law who's white. And some lady cut him off in traffic, and they were at the red light. It was the whole road rage thing. It was crazy. But the lady is mad at my brother-in-law, who's the one driving, and looks into the car and looks at me and literally says to me, "What are you looking at, monkey?" And I was just like, "Oh, lady, I wasn't even the one driving. I didn't even say a word to you. I was just looking." In fact, I was kind of worried that you guys were going to crash into each other. Like, it was just, so yeah, I've had some of that.
Wow.
And many other things. Like I've been followed around in stores and, yeah. But I also want to comment on one thing, Paul. Like you said, right? You said you're uncomfortable, and this is an uncomfortable topic. You're probably more comfortable than I am, but it's not the most comfortable thing to talk about. It is an uncomfortable topic, but right, that's the only way this is going to end. And that we're going to put a stop to this racism is if we're willing to talk about it. And really, that's the cry of the Black church right now of like, hey, we know this is uncomfortable. We know this is awkward, but we need the church to speak up. I personally need that. I need to know that the church is with me, standing with me, and I need the church to speak up.
Do you feel like the church is taking a good stance on this?
This is what it is, right? There's been a lot of talk of like, hey, the church needs to take a stance on this. The church needs to say something. Even different ministries within the church and movements within the church, right? Everyone's like, hey, we say something. I agree. What I do struggle with, though, is I think we live in a world right now, especially if it's not on social media, then you must not be saying something, right? Like social media is where a lot of people get their news, where they get their information, it's where they learn. And the reality is, and I guess this is for the younger church too, that is not the only way to communicate. So yes, the church does need to say something, but that something does not have to be on Instagram, does not have to be on Twitter, does not have to be on Facebook. If your parish naturally uses those means, then please keep using it. And if it's a platform that you naturally use to address other issues, then I would ask you the question, why aren't you using it? If you're not, why aren't you using it to address the race issue? I think the most common place that the church takes a stance on something and speaks up against something is right in church, right from the pulpit, right from the ambo, right at mass during times of the homily. Address and denounce the sin of racism, right? That's the same way racism is a sin. Because right, racism says because of the color of your skin, you are not on the same level as me. Because of the color of your skin, I'm going to dehumanize you. I'm going to treat you differently, and I'm not going to give you the dignity that you naturally have at the very fact that you were created in the image and likeness of God. So anything that strips away my dignity is a sin. And from the ambo and from the pulpit is where we stand, is where our leaders stand in the church to denounce sin. Depending what your role is in the church, I think there are different places and levels and platforms that you use to do that. Our pastors, our priests, is probably from the ambo, maybe a letter to parishioners. Our bishops, is definitely letters, because that's how they communicate often in that way anyways. And those sitting in the pews, you need to be having these conversations, right? The same way you and I are talking right now, Paul. Parishioners need to be having this conversation with themselves, amongst themselves, and they need to be having this conversation within their families. They need to be having these conversations with their priests and their pastors as well.
Viewers, if you were listening to the first session, that was one of my first confessions, which was essentially that after a couple of weeks of it being in the headlines, I started to struggle with wanting to move on to something else, like my consumerism, my need to consume media and news, and the next story wanted me to like move on from it. Is there real change that we can make besides just talking about it?
There is, and we've come a long way. To be honest, right? There was a time Black men weren't allowed to be in the seminary, right? We've come a long way. We still have a lot more work to do. There are several things that we can do. First and foremost, I don't know about your parish. My parish, I walk into it. It's a white corpus on the cross. It's white European-looking statues with blue eyes. It's white saints. And my current parish, my pastor's Hispanic, but my whole life, for the most part, a big chunk of my life, except for when I was in Boston at that Haitian parish, my priest did not look like me, right? So as a child and even as a teenager, I walked into a parish and I looked at statues and I looked at images, and immediately I said to myself, sainthood is not attainable. It's not possible for me. That is a thing that only a white European can attain. It's not something I could do because none of these saints look like me, right? Immediately it communicated that. I was just reading an article of a priest in Boston who died, a Black priest. And sadly like that, and this is the case in many dioceses, but that Black priest passed away. And in this article, they talked about how he was the last Black priest to be ordained in our diocese in like over 30 years, right? So there needs to be an intentionality of the church right now to not only speak out, but there needs to be an intentionality to reach out, right? We exist to evangelize. That's our mission. And we're at a point right now where we almost need to overcompensate. The Black community, the Black church, as speaking to Catholics, has been failed in many ways, or we feel like the church has failed us. Unfortunately, because where we find ourselves right now, there needs to be an intentionality in saying, okay, yes, I am going to focus on the Black community intentionally. I'm going to put funds towards that. I'm going to put ministries towards that. I'm going to try to hire people in my parishes on a diocesan level that look like them, and not only look like them, but that understands them, that could speak into their reality.
You were saying something, I got caught up in your story, so I might fumble over the words and forget it, but to be an ally of them is to transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who lack it. And I think that, you use the word, we need to overcompensate because of the lack of compensation that has happened beforehand, so that other people have some. And And I'm starting to realize that I need to be okay sometimes with overcompensating, probably all the time, with overcompensating, because that's the only way that we can help a group of minority actually raise to the level of equality.
Right. One of the things that St. Catherine did is she realized the privileges that she had as a white woman. So St. Catherine would literally, like, a family would save up to start a business, or she would even help them start a business, and she would open a business on her name, right? And she would buy a piece of property, start a business, and on paper that business was hers, but really that business belonged to a black person, to a black family, a person of color. She realized the privilege that she had as a white woman, how because she was white, there were certain things that she could do in society that people who weren't white could not do, and she used that for the benefit of her community, of the black community specifically. And we are at war. We are at war in a spiritual sense, and we know war, right? War, when it happens, there's several different battlefields. It doesn't just happen in one place, right? It's when we're at war, this state is fighting against this area over here. There's a war breaking out on this mountain or on this hill or down in this valley. Like, there's several different battlefields. So one thing we need to discern is, all right, Lord, which battlefield within this war against racism, what battlefield are you calling me to? So yes, right, you're a man of God. If you're part of another denomination, they'll probably say you're a man of the cloth, right? You're a minister. But like, you're in ministry, you're a man of God. So primarily, your battlefield and mine right now, it's within the church. That's the platform we have. These are the people we interact with. And quite frankly, for me, that's the group of people I care about the most, right? I love everyone, but I really care and love the church and want nothing good for the church. And I just want the church to be faithful to her mission. So that's my platform. However, even when it comes to politics too, like I do have a platform there, kind of, right? Yes, I could vote. But I could also be writing letters to my political leaders. I could be doing phone calls, right? There are policies that are put in place that I could. Right here in Georgia, there's a fight going on right now. Hate crimes aren't a thing in Georgia. Like, you can't get charged with a hate crime. So right, that's something I could be calling my leaders and be like, hey, this is not okay. Like, this needs to become a thing, right? Because we had that son and father that chased that black man and killed him right here in Georgia, right? And if hate crimes was a thing, that would have been one of the charges that came up against him, but it's not. So it's not one of the charges. So politically, we do have some things we could do. People we could call, letters we could write, emails we could send. But you also need to know, all right, Lord, what's my battlefield? For you and I, again, as men of God, as fathers, as husbands, first and foremost, it begins within our first battlefield is our home, right? We just have this call to protect our home and to form and educate our children. So it starts there. So it's like, hey, what are you saying to your kids? How are you bringing your kids into this, and teaching them the right way to respond to this, but also a platform on our church and within different ministries that we're involved in. What are we doing in those places as well?
Awesome. I think that gives us like a very clear ending, because every single session we want to like challenge people. And I think that is a perfect question, because it's a question I need to reflect on as well. It's like, what is my battlefield? And so I think we're going to call it quits for today. And it was like a great conversation with you. I missed you a lot. This makes me miss you more. Makes me want to just sit around and talk about our families and stuff all the time. But I feel the question like I want to throw out to our viewers is, and to challenge you to really think and pray about, and to then act on, is what is the battlefield that the Holy Spirit is calling you to in this fight against racism? Like, is it politics? Is it the church? Is it a local community? Is it to start like serving downtown where we live, downtown Toledo? Is like find a place? Because I think that sometimes we struggle with feeling like, what can I do? I'm just one person. And I think that maybe it's even just simply talking to your parents who might be racist, talking to a friend who might be racist, and starting to challenge them on their thoughts. And that might mean that you give up a friendship because they are unwilling to be friends with you with that viewpoint. But I think that is some of the uncomfortableness that us as white people need to be willing to do. we need to be willing to give up things so that other people can have more.